accountability from government. We also see, I'll just point to a headline today. The Supreme Court overturns a case in Texas.
I wanted to bring that up to you, and then they say, oh, when it's a split court, it leans left. So Scalia's magically out of the way, and now here's Kennedy again shooting down state laws.
Well, yeah, what was going on in Texas? Now, I don't care whether you're, pro-life, pro-abortion, whatever. The question on the table is, does Texas have the right, the power as a state, a sovereign state, to require certain, health and safety standards regarding abortion clinics? That seems to me to be a no-brainer.
Yeah, there's more regulations on a Baskin-Robbins than there is in a mortuary.
Exactly right. And so the Supreme Court knows better. How is that even... it just defies all logic, and we've seen this over and over again. The totalitarian nature of this court, it's manifest, and so we're in the same position, maybe even in a worse position than the British people were. And we're, it's not because we're necessarily part of a European Union style situation.
No, instead, our tyranny is the Supreme Court.
That's right. We're under the control of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is acting sovereign over the states and over local jurisdictions and so forth. The situation is untenable. And,
so we need a Washington exit.
Mm-hmm. How do we do it? Is there a mechanism for that? It's called the Constitution. That's the mechanism, but they just ignore it. I mean, the Constitution strictly limits the power of the federal government, but we don't see that. And what about the checks and balances in the system? Isn't it supposed to be the legislative branch that makes the laws? How often do we see this president effectively making laws, issuing edicts to, all 50 states?
Arresting members of the press. In fact, I wanted to bring this next up to you. I have ABC News headline here where the United Nations, here's the headline I'm grabbing out of the stack, UN, this is ABC News, KRGV, more Central Americans headed to the U.S., and they admit they're here illegally. The UN's running the program in Central America. They have a deal with Mexico. They ship them up here illegally, and then they put them on buses inside the U.S. and then ship them to Democratic Party facilities. This is what we broke 2 years ago with our reporters. Mm-hmm. They're coming up at the bottom of the hour. They're in McAllen. I mean, the Supreme Court ruled to stop it. He's violating the law. So when he doesn't like what the Supreme Court says, he ignores it. But when he does like it, he goes for it.
Right, exactly right. And you talk about the immigration issue. This is ultimately, I think, what was the real catalyst behind this Brexit vote. And here we are. Are we in better shape than they are or worse shape? The only thing we're going to be able to do, honestly, from a pragmatic political standpoint, is to elect Donald Trump in 2016. I can't say, as I may have once suggested to people, that it makes a heck of a big difference who we elect to Congress. We did that in 2010. How did that work out for us?
I was about to say, you and I admitted that our failure. I mean, we were so sick of George W. Bush as more libertarian patriots that we sat out the 2008 election because McCain was so horrible.
Right.
But I mean, now look at what we've got, because McCain knew he was a shill. He knew he was a fall guy, like a Don King boxing match. He was there to take a dive. But we should have just still elected that puppet, because he's an old, evil white guy. He wouldn't have had the race car to play. He couldn't have got any of this done.
Exactly. I mean, in retrospect, who knows? But the point is this: what we need is not just shaking up Washington by electing a president. We've got to actually create or recreate an alternative political party in in Washington, and that's what I think Trump is uniquely positioned to do. And let me ask you a question, Alex. Do you believe these polls that are coming out now? That he's 10 points behind Hillary and so forth. What does your gut tell you?
I had a 30-minute conversation with Roger Stone yesterday, quizzing him about another Trump insider inside the campaign that I talked to, and he confirmed a lot of what I was told, and it was so staggering that I wrote a bunch of notes and then I haven't even covered it yet. I was thinking about covering it next hour, writing an article about it, because you got a big story and you don't even know how to deal with it. It's so big, but. he was confirming some of the internal polling they've done, showing that Trump's pretty much in a dead heat everywhere. If they just do a fair poll, if they cast it the way Hillary's casting it the other way, he's like 10 points ahead.
Right.
And he went on to say in a lot of key states he's way ahead, but he said many people are so intimidated. People ask, why is the left out stabbing people? Why are they out attacking? Why are they beating up old ladies when it makes them look so bad? They don't care. They want to scare you away from coming out to vote. They want to scare you from saying you're for Trump. They've done their numbers. They've done their actuary. So the truth is, from the polls they've done in focus groups, they're thinking upwards of 10 to 14% of people, whether they be Democrat or Republicans or non-voters, that mean, folks that have been out of the system for a while, that really Trump's going to win with a Reagan-style landslide. But they think Hillary is just trying to act like she's really winning and having the media say it because they're looking at probably stealing the election.
Well, that is exactly what I have been saying now for some time. I believe that Trump can cause a political realignment in this country like we haven't seen since 1980. And I don't base it on the polls, because with the polls you've got to actually see how they were pushing.
But also, right? Exactly, people are scared to say they're for Trump. That's why I wear a hat. Donald Trump hat when I'm downtown around communist areas, because I want to get it in their face, and they run in fear. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. My opinion has been based on the anecdotal relationships, the experiences I have with people. For instance, I will tell you, I have a sister, an older sister, who voted for Obama enthusiastically the last two election cycles. Oh. Now, I love her. I just say she's misguided.
We all have family like that.
Yeah. She is on fire for Trump. She can't wait to vote for Trump. And this has caused, I don't know what it is about Donald. I mean, honestly, because I wish I had that magic with my own sister, right? And I see this over and over with people, not just my relatives, people I run into who, you would think, or you have reason to believe that they are Democrats, liberals, progressives, what have you, and this is a whole different ballgame for them. Trump, the personality Trump, because of his outspokenness, his forthrightness. And look at that speech he gave about Hillary last week. That was amazing. That
proves he's for real. That he's so hardcore. That shows he is definitely not a shill for Hillary. We know that now.
Have we seen a Republican presidential candidate go on the attack? And it was not personal. It was not. Everything he said in that speech was dead accurate. It was as if, you could have been listening to Alex Jones or Joseph Farah give that speech. That's what we've got. Now, look, it's not. I'm not saying Donald Trump is perfect. I didn't even support him. Personally, I was a Ted Cruz guy.
Yeah, the truth is, he's got too much of a liberal background. But I've gone back and done the research. That was because he was doing business with these people, and he's a nice guy. And in many respects, look at the whole gay issue. He is somewhat liberal on some issues. But the key is, at least he's a nationalist that isn't out to get the country and wants a rising tide to raise all ships.
And you have to admit, I think, just objectively, that he is in the best position to challenge this woman. Because he will tell you exactly what she is, and it's going to be up to. That's why I say it's not a dime's worth of difference this time. It's trillions and trillions of dollars. It's probably the last chance we have to elect a president that's going to, give us the chance, not just to change direction, but to do a 180. And I really believe that's the opportunity.
And that's why they're so scared of him. That's why I say he's unelectable, couldn't get the nomination, blah, 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 because they know he's the best candidate. Their fear, shows us that something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Let me ask you this question, because, obviously you're a smart news guy who had the instincts to envision the whole internet, resistance, the whole nine yards, one of the founding fathers, the current, wave of liberty worldwide, Joseph Farah, joining us here today at WND.com. What do we hammer on most? I don't think there's been enough talk about how she sold us out to the communist Chinese with the missile secrets. Let me just throw that out at you. What about this? What about hammering the point that, I know you've done this, but that she gets $100 million from Gulf states that keep women as prisoners, but then runs and executes homosexuals, then she runs around to gay pride parades. The hypocrisy. What about hammering her Brian Williams moment? What do we do to reach out to her idiot supporters and get them out of their stupid trance?
I think that, again, that speech by Trump was so perfectly crafted to do just that, to turn people who, out of anger, whatever, maybe ignorance, supported Bernie Sanders, in the primaries, but they know what Hillary is. They know she is as corrupt as anybody who's ever run for president before. And, if they're going to vote at all, I think a lot of them,
sure,
and the polls even show this, that a lot of them will turn to Trump. That's why I say I think that we're looking at a major realignment here. It will not hurt. I got a lot of friends, even relatives, who work in government in Washington.
Sure.
Under the dome, and they're worried about losing Congress. I think Trump's going to help every Republican.
I agree. Let me ask you, the time we have left, what happens if they steal the election from him? I mean, don't they know he's just a manifestation of rising nationalism, populism, and disgust with corruption?
Well, he's the biggest fear that Washington insiders of both parties have. That, again,
that certifies him
for me that we're on the right track here with Donald Trump.
I totally agree, but what happens if they do steal the election from him?
Well, I mean, if they steal the election from him, it's all over. I mean, America's over. Quite honestly, right? I mean, what can I do?
I agree. That's not rhetoric. We've really reached the point where it's do or die.
Yeah. Oh, no question about it.
In closing,
and by the way, I want to ask you another question.
Sure.
I love interviewing you on your own show. What do you make of this? I'm sure you've seen it. This UN military convoys all over the country. Now they're in Virginia, but of course we've seen them in many, many other states over the years. What do you make of this? What is going on that we don't know?
They've got them. Listen, I would just ask the question 15 years ago, just like you did, and when this all started, maybe it's like 20, and then they've just got caches everywhere. They're newer equipment. They're not just old stuff they're refurbishing. It's bizarre, and now all of the news, it's the UN says this, the UN says that. The UN's bringing in refugees to Texas. The UN's going to watch our police departments. I think they're getting ready for a total collapse and maybe states not being part of the union, and I think they're getting ready for civil war, too. I'm not saying it's coming, Joseph, but when they've got battle tanks being brought into the U.S., being shipped in, not out, Abrams tanks with UN on the side, something this way wicked comes. We'd be idiots not to think so. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you have to ask yourself, what are the alternative theories? I can't think of any. That's the scary thing. And you mentioned earlier the UN role in the border and immigration from the southern border, but it is the UN that is also determining where these so-called Syrian refugees go.
And they could activate them to start rioting, and just like they've done in Europe, and use that. I mean, these are brand new Hunger Games giant-style armored vehicles being shipped around the U.S. and cached. We've got to cover this. Joseph Farah, WND.com. Thank you so much for coming on.
All right, keep the faith, buddy.
Wow, he just brought up that topic. I need to cover that. We're going to cover that when we come back, along with the food shortage issue. 395% global food shortage. That's from FEMA.
We're on the march. The empire's on the
This is hardcore. We're here broadcasting worldwide. I'm Alex Jones. I'm promoting free market, open societies, based on free will and free association, and based on human instinct, human spirit, and basic common sense. That is all 180 degrees the opposite of what the globalists are pushing. I remember having Dr. Blaylock on like 20 years ago, top brain surgeon. He was still a brain surgeon at the time before he retired. And all these other experts on saying low-fat diets are causing Alzheimer's and brain damage and heart disease. And they had studies then. I remember my dad saying it. It was trans fats, artificial fats, burnt fats that are bad. Oh, but now it was in the New York Times last week. I have the article and the Huffington Post. Oh, my gosh, women need more complex fats because it's good for their skin and your brain. Oh, my, let's give them a Pulitzer Prize. Zuckerberg came out on Friday in the New York Times, and it said, Zuckerberg covers up his webcam. That was the headline. You should, too. About 19, 20 years after I pioneered it and have been made fun of at least 18 years ago on BBC documentaries. Alex, John Ronson asks, why is your webcam covered? You think they're watching you, do they? Oh, the little polywash think he got a little bit of a problem, huh? Oh, you think little green man won't get you too, huh?
and werewolves as well.